watching Audio Haze last night, a channel I enjoy, and he was talking about audio interfaces for beginners. And some of the stuff that he explained, I feel there are other ways to explain it, and you might be confused, as I was confused for many years. For example, I always didn't quite understand why was there a preamp and then an amp knob. They both seem to do the same thing. Should I make the preamp knob small and then make the other gain large? Or should I make the preamp large or the other gain small? I mean, I just didn't understand it. And I'd go read about this stuff and get even more confused. In fact, just before I did this video, I went to read again. And once again, I'm like, So this explanation is very unorthodox, but hopefully it's what I figured out eventually, and hopefully it'll help you. Rule number one, a microphone uses the sound of your voice to vibrate a diaphragm that's wrapped around a coil. The coil moves around a magnet and generates a current. The current, you could take that current and then put into another microphone and use it as a speaker in a sense, in that the current would go through it, go into the wires, and then move the magnet, and then you could hear. So you could take two microphones and connect them together. And Julian Krause's channel, he talks about that. He has two microphones that are put together. Unfortunately, in the real world, the current that comes out of your microphone is too low to work in electronics. So if you build some electronics and you want to digitize that signal, the signal is too low to actually write the memory, to basically write those zeros and ones. The signal is too low. Or similarly, if you want to power some speakers, again, how are you going to power the speakers? It's just too low. So what you need to do is you need to bring the signal, the voltage from the microphone, up to a level that the electronics can deal with it. Whether it's an audio interface with computers, or it's an amp, or anything in like a music studio or your camera or whatever. The preamp name it's true in a sense that it's an amplifier, but it's misleading in the sense that it confuses people, confused me, with it's also an amplifier. It's not an amplifier, in my opinion, or it's not really good to think about it as an amplifier. What it is well, it is an amplifier, but what it does is it takes a very weak signal and it takes that signal and creates a larger, stronger voltage signal that can be used, again, to write memory, to record video, audio tapes, the speakers, whatever. So that's what you have to understand about the preamp. And the way it works is, and the way a tube works, like, so Audio Haze, he was talking about these tubes, saying, oh, it's, they create a warmer sound. Like, I don't think it's quite getting it. Like a tube is just a transistor. There are many ways of creating amplifiers. You can use solid state, which are used now, or you can use a tube, which is basically just special types of coated metal. The reason it's in a tube is that when oxygen gets on these particular metals in heat, as the current goes through them, they burst into flames. So they take the oxygen out, and that's how they work. So, but the great thing about a tube, in a sense, is that you can sort of understand physically more what's going on. So if you look closely in a tube, there'll be these two, steel metal things, and through that metal thing is a large current that's coming from the power plant or your batteries. So let's just say it's 1 volt, right? And so 1 volt is going through these two metal plates, except it's not. It's constructed that the 1 volt does not go through it. But there's another little plate called the base, and the way it's constructed is that if you take a very, very small current, it's like 10 millivolts. So you take, it's even a millionth of a volt. If you take a millionth of a volt and you put it through this little plate, it will allow, let's even say the whole thing, 1 volt to go through. So you can take a very small signal from your microphone and it will create a very large signal. If you half that signal, it'll half the large signal. If you double it, it'll double the large signal. Do you sort of get what I'm saying? So that you're not really amplifying the signal itself. You're not taking the mic signal of, let's say, 10, the 10 electrons, 20 electrons, and adding a bunch of electrons. You're not really doing that. You're really taking those electrons and using the property with the types of metals and composites, whatever, in the tube or transistor or whatever, to basically allow the stream to regulate the stream, right? So you're using the little wave from the microphone, and it's taking this big, huge river of electrons, and it's creating the same shape that you have from the wave of the microphone. Unfortunately, no amplifier works perfectly, and there are a myriad of problems, which are why preamps are such a often discussed, analyzed, talked about thing to audiophiles, because there are tons of problems that you need to address, and you always need to make trade-offs. You can never get perfect. So you can make your amplifier and say, I want it to be sensitive to very quick changes in electrons. So somebody is speaking into a microphone and they're going up and down very quickly. I want to make the amplifier very sensitive to that. So let's say they make the preamp that does that, that creates that signal. And then somebody says, oh, but wait, like if I'm speaking loudly for a while, if I go, it actually starts to dissipate. It doesn't work really well. It doesn't get a good signal. So they say, okay, well, we're going to create an amplifier that can really generate a nice, great wave of that loud sound or whatever, right? And they do that and it works well. And then the person comes back and says, oh, but wait, now it's not really reacting really well to the changes in voltage. So tons of these problems are what they deal with. So no preamp is going to be perfect, but that's what they're dealing with. So all these types of problems, like how quickly it reacts to the signal, how it deals with very relatively strong signals from the microphone or relatively weak signals from the microphone, right? Like all these things, like responsiveness, the strength, the weakness, the whatever. They talk about noise. Anyway, I don't need to tell you. You see all the nonsense essentially going on about it, but that's the problem. There's no perfect solution. There are only trade-offs, and each manufacturer tries to build one with the best set of trade-offs for you. But you as a user should know that a trade-off that works for one person may not work for you. So again, there's no perfection. Okay, but I think I've hopefully convinced you that the preamp's role is to take a very weak signal and then create a large signal. The large signal which you use in your whatever in your amplifier or whatever. So to get back to that question, what would you set? Would you set the gain on the amplifier high and the output gain low, or one of the things Haze, one of the things he says, he talked about setting the gain to the proper loudness. And I think he misses the point. He misses one of the big points. It has nothing to do, well, in my opinion, about the loudness. Loudness is relative. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, so when you set the gain, the preamp gain, you can, remember I said there are many different trade-offs you can take, how responsive it is, whether you're going to be accurate for large relative voltages from the microphone, or where you can be more sensitive to very, very low relative voltages from the microphone. Pretend we don't have any gain now. Pretend that we have, let's get back to a 1 volt stream, right? So pretend we have a 1 volt stream, and we have the microphone at millions of volts controlling this 1 volt stream, and everything is fine. And then we put it out there, and somebody says, oh, but you know what? It doesn't, I really want to get more detail out of it. Like the signal's too low, like somebody's speaking, but I want them louder. Then you're going to come back and you're going to say, yeah, but if I make it louder, it's going to be more noise because I've optimized my preamp to get the best balance of this 1 volt to the very small voltage from the microphone. Well, what's a person's going to say? The person's going to say, yeah, well, I don't live in a perfect world. And, I would like to have everything set up where I'm doing this perfectly, but the person is not close enough to the mic. Again, we'll get back to this SM7B. I have an SM7B, everything works perfectly when the person is just a foot away, but they're not. They're back here. So I need to raise that I need to get that stuff. I don't care about the noise. So you put on a knob, and in the knob, you put in more voltage. So you put in, let's say, 1.5 volts on the heavy voltage side. And of course, now when the microphone thing changes, because it's 1.5 and it's not optimized, generally more voltage is going to go through than it should, right? Because in a sense, when you're doing that, it's the amplifier now is struggling to do what it can't do. It just can't deal with that much current on the other side being manipulated by the small side. Similarly, a person might come and say, oh, it's way too loud. The person's like 1 inch from my microphone. It's way too loud. So reduce the voltage from 1 volt to 0.7 volts or whatever, so that, I don't get this clipping or whatever. And that's how a gain works on a preamp. It is not about loudness. It is not about increasing it to make you loud. It's about picking where you want the sensitivity of the amplifier to focus its attention on. Do you want it to try hard to translate a few electrons into a lot of electrons? Or do you want to say, no, ignore all the small electrons, the few electrons, just focus on getting the 20 or 30 electrons, getting them right? That's what you're doing with your preamp gain. So now I know I first set my preamp gain to get the balance I want of, well, hopefully just keep it where it's not adding anything or taking anything away, right? But anyway, whatever I set it at, that's going to be my decision of how much signal I want to noise. I think in the end of the day, that's what you're picking. It's the other gain that just basically sets, okay, I'm sending this to you, and this is what I'm saying is loud, and this is what I'm saying soft. So, you set that gain so that, well, let's just say somebody screams in the middle of your thing. You're like, well, I don't want that low. I don't care if that distorts. I want the 99% of it. So you would set that gain that you're saying, this is where I want the gain. This is a voice. This is the normal loudness I want. I'm setting it here. Sounds good to you, even though I know at a certain point this person will scream. I don't care about that. Okay, so as I was just thinking about it, the preamp, the gain, to me, the gain is the wrong word. On a preamp, it should be called sensitivity. So you have the preamp sensitivity, and then you would have the output. I don't even know if gain is even a good word there. Maybe volume is a better word there. Well, normally they do use volume. So let's get back. Let's talk about the Shure SM7B, one of my big bugbears. I watch many of these videos. So now that I've explained everything, and I hope you understand that, now let's start from the beginning, right? Okay, so the engineers at Shure 40 years ago, whatever, took some magnets, some wire, some various types of metals and whatever, and tinkered with them to get the best sound of a voice speaking from 3 inches. And let's just say that the voltage of that voice, the average voltage of that voice was 10 millivolts, right? So they designed a microphone to get the best sound of 10 millivolts, and they built an amplifier especially for this microphone that will take 10 millivolts, and it will work with 1 volt. So you go down to 1,000 millivolts, maybe you'll go down to 1,000 millivolts in the output, right? So it's a proportionality, right? So they designed this SM7B to work right here with this amount of strength, of sound strength, to go into an amplifier and to take that strength and convert it into what you're listening to now. So if somebody takes this microphone that was designed to be used 3 inches away from the face, and they now set it up on a table to do their podcast, and it's now 2 feet away, what do you think they would say when that person says, well, my amplifier doesn't have enough gain, right? Remember, a preamp, they're two sides. There's the input side, the very low voltage of the microphone, and there's the output side. There's the essentially the output side, which is another stream of electrons, another thing of voltage that the amplifier is going to use to take the small amplifier and modulate it in the same way as an output. So if you're stepping this far back, the amplifier, the preamp that they worked with, that they've optimized, they know that 10 millivolts will be optimal to get a really good signal. But now that you're back here and you're like 10 billionth of a volt, right? You're even a much, much smaller thing. Well, what's going to happen when you try and take that really small voltage and put it through a preamp that they know generally most preamps work? Well, the voltage is too small to change the current. And let me clear up some of what I was saying before. And I was saying you change it from 1 volt to 1.5 volts or 1 volt to 7 volts. Let me explain it in a different way. Ultimately, what you want from the preamp, let's just say, on a 1 volt reference, which is generally what a lot of audio is, let's just say you want a half volt, right? That's what you want, is a half volt. So assuming again there's no knob on my preamp, and I'm using the Shure exactly the way I'm supposed to be using it, right? And I'm a few inches away and I'm talking in a normal voice and I'm generating half a volt in my preamp, right? From my 10 millivolts. Okay, I'm doing half a volt. So now if I move back, let's say I'm now only doing 1/10 of a volt, but I want half a volt. Well, how do I get to that half a volt? 2 ways, right? First way is get your butt back close to the microphone to give the 10 millivolts you need to get the half volt in your preamp. Or if you can't do that, won't do that. What's the other way to get a half volt? Well, the 10 millivolts is taking half of this current, right, from to get to a half volt, but now you have much less. Well, then just you increase the voltage on this end to 2 volts, and then you end up with a half volt, right? And that's what's happening when you're working with the gain thing. The problem is that, like I said, when you're working the preamp outside of its physical constraints, you're taking all this, it's like being on an assembly line, right? And you're picking things out. If you move the assembly line too fast, you can't pick things out and things fall on the floor or things get bunched up. Well, that's exactly what happens in a preamp. When somebody takes this, like the Shure SM7B, and they're this far back and they're generating such a weak current, but you're sending more and more stuff to do it, that person, the amplifier just can't match up the modulations well. So a lot of this current, the extra current that's sending through to get to the half a volt is now seeping through. And it'll, maybe too much a little bit here, not enough here, and it basically ends up as noise. That's essentially what noise is. Like, I didn't really pick this, but you gave it to me because you weren't sure. I shouldn't get into noise. But anyway, I hope this further explains how a preamp works. In a perfect situation, you should put your preamp at whatever not flat, but whatever, there's no extra voltage or wherever the optimal sweet spot is for your preamp. You should put it there, and in a perfect world, get as close to the microphone to where you're getting exactly the level of voltage or signal you want. That's really how you should do it in a perfect world. And that's why I get really upset of those YouTubers. And I also want to say another thing about Banjo is, like, I commented about cloud lifters and got into it with him, and I'm sure it was a very unpleasant conversation for him, but he's a great guy, a great channel, because he got into it. And actually in the next video he said, I'm going to do some tests, no cloud lifter. So he understands this. But, people, and this is what so annoys me, is that physics are physics. And I hate it when somebody says, oh no, my marketing, my little box here, my cloud lifter, it can fix this. Your physics is wrong. Cloud lifter fixes that. You're a dummy. You don't, no, you don't have to worry about that. You use the cloud lifter and you fix it. And to me, no. Well, I mean, I'm not saying not to use a cloud lifter. Again, we don't live in a perfect world. If you want to use this as a podcast mic, use it as a podcast mic with somebody sitting 3 feet away. But I'm just saying that, but no, I mean, you're not, the physics are the physics. If you want to get the optimal performance from a microphone, the way it's designed, use it any other way, fine. Maybe you like the way it distorts. I don't know. Again, I'm not telling you artistically what to do. But if you want to use it in the way it was engineered to be used, you need to use it in that way. And if you're going to add other things like cloud lifters or other preamps or whatever to get it to work in the way that you want it to work, that's fine. But don't blame the mic. Don't say, oh, the mic is too quiet, or the mic is underpowered, or anything like this. Like when people start criticizing the mic, it just drives me nuts. You can't criticize any microphone. You can only use them either the way they're intended or they're not intended. And if you don't use them the way that they're intended, that's fine. But don't say that they had a problem. They don't have a problem. You just chose to use them in whatever way you wanted, for whatever reason, that's fine. So I don't want to get too far into this. Where are we at now? Like 8 minutes. Oh yeah, that's way too much. Anyway, but I hope in explaining the SM7B and how it works, how it's meant to work, you'll understand also. Oh, I see I'm peaking. See? Why is this peaking? Oh my God. Let's turn this up. See? All right. So I don't know how long I did this for. So I was actually turning my preamp sensitivity knob up too high. So what was happening is it was clipping, right? Now I've put it back down to what it is, which is usually at 0, the way I have this set up. And the reason it's 0 is because this mic is going through this DBX286S. The preamp is in there. That's what, again, what I say about the cloud lifter. Don't add preamp to preamp because you're just adding noise. So DBX is doing the mic preamp. We now have the line signal, and now we don't want to boost that line signal. That's stupid in the mode 2 because, again, we'll just be adding noise. Anyway, so it's back to the way it was. And I can take this footage. There's no way I'm being able to get that distortion out. Why can't I get the distortion out? Because I was setting the sensitivity at the preamp stage where it's taking the signal, and you can only do it one time, no do-overs. You get one chance, you get the signal from the microphone, and you do that translation from weak signal to strong signal, and then that's it. You can't go back again. People want to go back again. They come up with these absurd things like 32 floating bit, whatever. Go into that another day, but it's not going to work. So anyway, once you set your preamp, once you've done that first amplification, that's it. Now again, each time you amplify, by the way, you're adding more noise and distortion or whatever. There's a whole other subject. Main thing to understand here, again, use a microphone the way it was meant to be used optimally with what's an expected amplifier constraints based on Mother Nature and physics. And then you'll be good. And if you're not in a perfect world, again, you got the gain knob to just put a little bit because whatever, you gotta put the stuff in and make your client happy and whatever. But again, I don't go on YouTube and say that some X equipment is bad and you need to use this other piece of thing. No, please don't do that. Thanks for watching.